Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the greatest generation, the literal greatest generation. When you hear that name, we tend to associate him with the other great leaders of the time. Moshe, Aaron, Yehoshua, Kalev, the Nesiim, the leaders of the tribes, men that have stood out even amongst the greatest generation. But the truth was, we have the hindsight 2020. We already know the story. We already know what Pinchas did to earn such recognition. But at the time, Pinchas wasn't one of the names of the generation. He wasn't even a Kohen, even though he was the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, because he was born before the Torah was given. He did not yet receive the gift of Kahuna that Hashem gives him at the end of the story. But at the end of this week's parsha, the very end of the second parsha of this week, at the end of Balak, it tells the terrible sin that was going on amongst the Jewish people. One of the Nesiim, one of the leaders, one of the great names got up and committed a tremendous immoral act in public in front of everyone. And everybody froze. And Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't sure of the halacha and what the right thing was to do at that time. And Pinchas got up amongst people much greater than him. And says the Zichron Meir, he didn't say, who am I? There are much greater people than me. Let them run the show. I don't know. I don't want to step up. I don't want to go against everybody else. Moshe is trying to figure it out. Aaron's there. Elazar's there. Yeshua, his great student, the future leader of the Jews in the first generation in the land of Israel. They'll take care of it. Pinchas didn't say that because the Zichron Meir says that kind of perspective, that kind of yish, that kind of giving up and saying, it's not my place, it's not my, who am I to get involved? That anivus, that humility, is a false humility. Pinchas recognized something. He recognized what's right, even though there were much greater people in the room. And he recognized what's right, and he acted upon it. He had the fortitude, he had the conviction that he felt something was right, he felt it should be done, and he did it, and the eternal reward that Pinchas Elazar, the bris kuhuna that he got, was incalculable. But at the same time, there's a balance. And that's, I think, the important point. Because a lot of times we say, I'm right. I have to stand up. Yeah, everybody else is saying it's wrong, but I know and I'm right. But Pinchas didn't do that. When we say kanoi, that he was a zealot, and he went and he did it, first he stopped. And he asked Moshe, he asked his Rabbi, he asked his rabbi, is this not true? Is this the way to handle the situation? And Moshe said yes, and then he did it. So you have somewhat of a mix of characteristics, mix of behaviors here. On one hand, he had the conviction. He had the ability to get up and say, hey, Moshe, isn't this what's supposed to be done? Even though he wasn't of the illustrious people, to the point where even after he did this, the other Shavatim, the other tribes, were making fun of him and belittling him for some of his ancestry through his mother, and they called him Ben Puti. He wasn't of the yichus. He didn't have the nobility that some of the others had. He didn't have the name recognition of Yeshua. He wasn't a Kalev. But he had the conviction to say, I believe that this is right, this is what the situation calls for. Yet at the same time, he had the humility to turn to his Rabbi and say, isn't this what it's supposed to do? And then when his Rabbi said yes, and because you're the one who decided you're the one who said the halacha, it's your chiv to do it, and he went and he did it. And I think that's a tremendous lesson for us and a tremendous practical implications we could take in the situation. We live in a world where there's so much ideas, so much sheker mixed with emes, and it's so confusing, so much falsehood, so much lack of clarity of what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes we feel that we have the right understanding of things, even though society around us may not be may not be supplying the same message. But we feel it's right, and we have the conviction to do it, and we need to gather that strength and say, it's not a question of who am I. I have the ability, if I feel it's right, to stand up against the crowd, stand up and say this is what's right. Yet on the other hand, we also need to check ourselves. And we need to seek out higher authority. We need to seek out our rabbis, our mentors, and get the clarity, am I right? And once you have that assurance that this is right, go for it. Stand up for it, go against the tide, and say this is what the Torah tells us is value. This is what the Torah says is emes, is truth. And take the conviction like our forefather Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. And with that conviction, we could earn tremendous, incalculable reward, like Pinchas Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Good Shabbos.